Welcome back to my channel for a special edition about the equinox. Today in the northern hemisphere is the fall equinox as of September 21st. But it is not the equinox in the southern hemisphere until the 23rd, which is a little bit of a brain twister for me since the southern hemisphere is ahead of us. So, interesting. And at any rate, I'm going to talk about the equinox today because I'm in the northern hemisphere. And we're going to talk about it in relation to the Gate 5 and explore what human design has to teach us about that. So let's go ahead and dive in. So the equinox, whether you're in the southern hemisphere or in the northern hemisphere, is a time where we have an equal amount of light and an equal amount of dark. And so the days and the nights are equal length. And we have it just literally for a moment, actually. And they say that you can balance an egg on its end at the moment of equinox. I have attempted it and not actually done it myself, although I have heard from people who can. And so the equinox is a time of the change of the seasons, just like the solstices are. And so this is where we have inside of Western culture the remnants of the ancient cultures that preceded it. And it's been acknowledged in cultures all around the world about the seasonal changes that are marked by the solstices and the equinoxes. And so I went and I looked a little bit because I always like to see this piece about, well, where were people paying attention to this? And I'm sure that even just what I can find on the internet now is a small portion of what actually happened. One of my favorites is Chuntillo in Peru, which is at the top of a hill in the coastal desert of Peru, are 13 towers in a perfect line. And this kind of cracks me up, but it's also kind of sad, which it was originally thought to be a fort. Okay, that's originally what people thought, because of course it had to be a fort, right? What else could it possibly be? But then archaeologists discovered that the structures were actually built as a place of worship, as the sun perfectly aligns with corresponding towers during the solstices and the equinoxes, right? So this is an example of overlaying a Western lens over the experience of ancient people, where they, at least some of the time in some of the places, were far more focused on acknowledging the living world than they were with fighting with each other, which is rather refreshing when you think about it, right? But Stonehenge, which is in what's now the UK, is probably the most famous, or one of the most famous at any rate, monuments to the solstices and the equinoxes. But there's also Karnak in Egypt. There's also Chaco Canyon, which is in what's now New Mexico. There's Chichen Itza, which is in Mexico. There are places all over the world where ancient people were not just observing the change of season, but actually creating monuments to them so that they could track it. And so why? Why is this so important? Why did people everywhere be paying attention to it, and what did it mean? So clearly mapping and tracking the movement of the earth in relation to the sun was a key aspect of the cosmology and the understanding of ancient people. And those of us who are still or are now following earth-based spirituality have kind of brought this up again and are looking at and wanting to align with these cycles of nature. Now, for ancient people, obviously these times were marking, like, for example, a time like in the equinox in the fall right now is a time to harvest, right? It's harvesting because we're coming to the end of summer. I know in the garden that I've been participating in, it's hugely abundant right now, right? There are so many greens, there are so many squashes, there's there's zucchini, there's winter squashes, there's just a fruit, there's pears, there's Asian pears, there's all kinds of stuff, right? This is a season of harvest. And so when we mark the equinox, we know that that's true. And we're also changing. Like after the equinox, my experience here, the fall equinox here, is it's like it gets dark really fast. Of course, we have the time change because as human beings, we like to mess around with the natural world that way. But other than that, it's also really clear that the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I know, like in the morning, it's getting lighter, later, and later. So we mark this because we're tuning into what is happening in our culture, where we tend to be very technologically focused and we're living in a kind of 24/7, 365 rhythm. We don't necessarily align with what's happening with the seasons. But I also think that we kind of do this at our peril, because after all, as a species, as humanity, we have been a part of the living world forever. And we have mostly been aligned with the natural rhythms. It's only since we started getting, indoor heating and we got lights and electricity and, so many different things that enabled us to be not living in alignment with these natural rhythms. But I do think that there's a consequence to this. I think a lot of us are like, woohoo, yay, I can stay up all night and I can be on the internet and I can do whatever. But it's actually damaging to our health. It's damaging to our well-being when we're not paying any attention. Because in fact, we are part of the living world. We're not separate from it. We've been taught that we were separate, and a lot of Western culture, especially in the last 500 years, has seen itself as separate from the living world, largely so that we could exploit it, right? We could just say, hey, there are minerals everywhere. Let's go get them. Hey, there are big trees everywhere. Let's go get them. Hey, there are rivers everywhere. Let's dam them and make power. Right, we really have been asserting our power and authority as a very powerful species on the planet, and our ability to manipulate the living world has brought us what we like to think of as a high standard of living. But again, it comes at a consequence. We have an epidemic of people who can't sleep. Right? People can't sleep. Why can't people sleep? What is going on with that? Chronic disease. Why do we have so much chronic disease? What is going on with that? Now, of course, there's lots of different reasons. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now. But the fact that this has become the norm is a big red flag for us, right? And so it's important enough that I explore this in depth in my forthcoming book on feminine sovereignty, 8 pillars for regenerating ourselves and our world. Because our relationship with the living world is our relationship with ourselves. It's our relationship with our bodies. It's our relationship with like our environment, right? And when we get so focused that we're not paying attention to these other things, this actually fosters illness inside of us. So it's important, from my point of view, for us to reinvigorate our indigenous roots. And let's just remember, we were all indigenous at some point in time in somewhere. And I know in the United States, I'm a descendant of colonists, for sure, right? And yet I have indigenous roots back in the British Isles. And I can relate to their earth-based spirituality. I can relate to the way that they really understood themselves as being in a dynamic relationship with the ecosystems that they lived inside of. So in the spirit of us reconnecting with the living world, I want to focus on one key element. There's always lots of different things we can focus on, but for today, I want to just focus on one key element, which is our relationship to the time and the seasons, which is what we've started out with. Now, obviously, our relationship to land is another really, really big one, right? But I'm not going to go into that today, because the gate 5, which is here on the sacral center, can really help us. So the gate 5 is known as patterns in traditional human design and consistency in quantum human design. And this gate is the place where we really can connect with the seasons and the cycles of nature. So whether that's a day, or whether it's a season, or whether it's a year, right? These are all things that are going on in the living world, been going on forever, and we can hope they will continue to go on forever, whatever happens to us. And These are things that have dictated the way that human beings have lived in relationship to their environment forever. And yet, like I said, especially since we've had the technology in the last, 50 to 100 years, really, really kind of catapulted us into a whole different dimension in terms of our relationship to time and energy and the cycles. And so we want to reinvigorate our relationship with the living world. And a lot of our challenges, a lot of our suffering comes from our disconnection with the living world and our disconnection from the cycles. And so we want to find a way to be reconnecting with that, because it's also about reconnecting with us. Because what are we but representatives and expressions of the living world? I mean, this is like a sack of water with a bunch of minerals with spirit thrown in, right? And bacteria. That's what we are. Without the living world, there would be no humanity. There would be no me. There would be no you. And we have been taught kind of something that's really BS, right? Which is that we are separate and that we can exploit, and we can exploit without consequence. But it's not true. We're seeing the results of this exploitative, extractive way of being. So my invitation to you during this equinox time is to be looking at your relationship with the cycles of nature. Look at your rhythm through the course of a day. Look at your rhythm through the course of a season. Look at your rhythm over the course of a year and see, do you actually pay attention or not? Or do you mostly pay attention because, your kids go to school at a certain time, or you go to school at a certain time, and then you're out of school, and so then you have the summer and you get to do summer things, which isn't really about tuning into the seasons. It's more about looking at what are the artificial rhythms that we've created as humanity around the year. I mean, after all, we used to just have the summer open without school and so that kids could go work in the fields. That's why you didn't have school in the summer. It's not so you could go and play. It's because it was a very busy time of working in the fields, right? And now it's become playtime. We're going to play in the summer. Interesting, right? It's another expression of our disconnection from the living world, recognizing that food really grows spring, summer, harvest at this time of year. And yet for us, a lot of us were like, we're back at school. We're being really focused. We're getting really mental this time of year, right? We're paying attention to the holidays that are coming up and all of the celebrations that are going to happen with the holidays and how we can take advantage of that and how we can experience the most that we want that way. But you know what? In the living world, the days are getting shorter and shorter and shorter here in the Northern Hemisphere. And so the direction is to be more inward, to be more reflective, to be contemplate more, right? To meditate more, to be inside more. And yet we get programmed into being outward more and more as we approach the holidays. So this is a really good time before you get kind of caught up in that rush, right? I mean, I went to Costco a couple of weeks ago. They had huge Christmas trees already. I mean, the whole front part of the store was full of Christmas stuff. And I was like, really? I mean, it's September, right? Christmas is on the way. So just, take a few minutes, write in your journal, meditate a little bit, go for a walk outside, sit with your back against the tree with your, pelvis on the ground and tune in and just feel what's happening there. I live in a very interesting environment where there are many things that die off in the wintertime because it does get colder, but then we also get rain. And when we get rain, other things start to grow. So what's the truth for you in your ecosystem? What's happening out there? Are you in a place where, if you're in the tropics, it doesn't change very much. If you're in the southern hemisphere, days are getting longer and it's getting warmer. If you live somewhere which is farther north than where I am, days are getting shorter and shorter, and it's getting colder and colder, and you're getting ready for winter, right? Like, just pay attention to this, because it's so easy for us to just kind of bump along and not really notice. So what are you harvesting from the summer season and the spring season, the year that's already happened? What are you going to be putting into your basket that you're going to take with you into the fall? And then what are you going to be gathering that you're going to hold on to going through the winter? And what are you going to be intuiting and imagining and intending for yourself for the upcoming year? So just giving yourself a break from the kind of mantra of going, to tune in and to see what's really true for you. And tap into the gate 5. The gate 5 there is there to support you. And this is one of the wonderful things about human design is that there are gates and channels and centers and different aspects of the chart that can support us in every part of our life, really, every meaningful part of our life. And so whether you have it defined in your chart or whether it's open in my chart. I don't have it defined. And yet I tap into the gate 5 a lot. When I feel like I get disconnected from the living world, I'm kind of like, okay, gate 5. How can I step into the highest expression of the gate 5? And that's a lot about recognizing the patterns of the natural world, finding a way that I can be consistent with those energies that are far greater than I am, far greater than humanity. We're here long before we showed up, and I'll be here long after we disappear. I want to wish you many, many blessings. Take care of yourself. Get ready for winter if you're in the northern hemisphere. Start, being warm, drinking hot liquids, and taking good care. Okay, many blessings. Much love. Bye for now.